Disturbing animated movies. From truly grotesque pieces of animated body horror to anthropomorphic fish brutally gutted and served as food, to some absolute classic films that don't rely on sheer graphic visuals but build up the atmosphere of the movie to give some scares. This is the Disturbing Animated Movies Iceberg. If you've somehow been living under a rock while this format has been beaten up over the last few years by YouTubers like me and a bunch of others, we will be starting at the top of this iceberg chart, beginning with the least obscure and least disturbing animated films, and moving all the way down to the most obscure and most disturbing animated features. Now, if you're impatient like me, and you scrubbed through the timeline already, or you checked the description, you'll notice that I'm starting on layer 4 today, and this is not a mistake. Part 1 is available on my good friend MediaAdorations channel, where he and I have taken on layers 1 to 3. There's no real reason to watch these in order though, as both contain some truly obscure, disturbing animated media. So feel free to check out his video once you are done watching this one. I will leave the link to that video below and in the pinned comment. Speaking of which, this is the perfect time to introduce yourself, Elijah.
Hello everyone. For those who don't know me, which is probably a lot of you, my name is Elijah from MediaAdoration. And before we start this iceberg, I figured I'd introduce myself. I enjoy working on icebergs and talking about different types of media, so when Ray gave me a chance to be a part of this iceberg, I couldn't say no. You will hear me talk about a few entries every now and then on this part, but if you'd like to see where most of my help went, check out part 1 on my channel, where me and Ray cover the first 3 layers of this iceberg. Now I don't want to draw out my intro too much, but I did want to say hi and give a basic rundown on my involvement with this video. I'm super excited to be a part of this, and I hope you guys enjoy what we have to offer.
Now why don't we stop explaining ourselves and get to the meat of why we are all here by getting into layer 4 of the Disturbing Animated Movies Iceberg. Layer 4 was my personal favorite of the entire iceberg, and it's for good reason. This layer strikes a good balance between obscure and disturbing. Most of the movies on here have a clear direction and fully succeed at what they are trying to do, and for the most part, have not gotten the love that I think they deserve. So with all that said, let's talk about the first one. Tales of the Brothers Quay does not refer to a single animated feature like many of the other entries on the iceberg. Instead, this refers to the literal many tales of the brothers Stephen and Timothy Quay. Identical twin brothers that split a passion for stop motion and honestly just straight up pioneers of the format, creating these stunningly creepy yet breathtaking visuals with all of their films. Most notably, the Street of Crocodiles, which on the surface appears to be nothing more than an experimental short film, but beyond that is a deep tale about hopes, dreams, and the untimely death of said hopes and dreams. They tell this story through various creepy looking marionettes that suggestively put together what appears to be our main character of the story, taking himself on a journey towards hope and escape, with the main character becoming ultimately trapped by the end of this tale. The Tales of Brothers Quay lands itself on here for its creepy visuals and overall vibe of every stop motion that they've ever worked on. With each one lies a striking amount of care and time. Booting up anything from their portfolio means you are in for a gloomy, desolate vibe that will leave you speechless at times and horrified at others. In short, the Tales of the Brothers Quay solidifies itself as a truly disturbing series that anyone should definitely give the time of day. Of everything on the iceberg, this one surprised me the most. Not just from the absolute body horror at hand, but the compelling story and world building that came from it was truly unexpected. Malice Doll is a Japanese CGI film that takes place in a world where humanity has been completely eradicated and the only living moving things, if you can even call them that, are machines. These robots that walk the desolate earth with their empty shells, simply existing to exist. In the first episode, the main character named Malice becomes broken, and another robot prompts her to repair herself, because that's what they do. They walk around, they get broken after enough time, they get repaired, and they repeat the same thing over and over again. Do some more walking, get broken, get repaired, and that's their entire life. Until Malice, A doll created for suggestive acts goes to get repaired, only to have this crazy bodily transformation, going from being a robot into a living human. And the rest of the series is her finding ways to live through the newfound issues. Something as simple as running out of breath from running is a new task, and all of her old friends that were robots now don't recognize her because she is no longer herself. And this is what was crazy to me, is this even goes over themes of identity. Like, who am I? Am I still me if I'm not in the same body? And this is an actual question that was posed in the first episode. The show can be a bit much at times and is most likely intended for adult audiences, but I will say I only watched the first episode, so don't blame me if you choose to watch this after and you see something that you didn't want to in the following episodes, because I didn't vet those ones. But I think there's only like 3 episodes out of this series, but it lands itself on this list for the constant horror, gore, and truly uncanny vibe of the animation that is just downright disturbing at times. Again, I really did not expect this from what appeared to be one of the more obscure entries on the list. I'll leave a link below for those who want to digest the series themselves, as I was able to find it for free on YouTube. Genocyber is an infamous OVA created in the 1990s. It's widely known to be one of the most extreme animated series in terms of violence, body horror, and all-around cybernetic warfare. The plot is based around these 2 psychic sisters that are fused into a bioweapon capable of mass destruction known as the Genocyber. The animated series is based on a manga of the same name, but there's one major issue, like with many mangas. It was cancelled before it was finished, and as such, the OVA never sustained a followed-through plot and was kind of all over the place. Very fitting for a show with blood-soaked battle scenes and brutally intense sequences involving dismemberment, exploding people, and much more that goes beyond what people expected from a simple animation, especially during this time. The actual series changes itself episode to episode, skipping all over the place, and with it, the story skipping all over the place. It changes with each iteration. One moment, we will be getting deep backstory on a character, and the next, we will see someone getting their guts ripped out. One of the most, disturbing films that I've had the displeasure of viewing, and the general consensus is that for its time, it was okay, but for right now, it's kind of a little bit outdated. But let me know if your opinions below on Genocyber, because I didn't really get much out of the film, even after its 2-hour runtime.
This dark adaptation of the classic Pied Piper tale takes a more grotesque and sinister approach to the well-known legend. The film's disturbing elements come from its visual style, which depicts the medieval setting in a grim, almost nightmarish way. The plague-ridden town is shown in detail with suffering, deformed characters and environments that are both bleak and decaying. The Pied Piper himself is portrayed as a much more menacing figure than in the traditional adaptations, bringing an eerie and ominous presence to the film. One of the most disturbing sequences is when the Piper leads the children away, but instead of it being whimsical or mysterious, the scene is filled with terror, suggesting something far more sinister awaits the children. The film's use of dark, exaggerated animation heightens the nightmarish atmosphere, making it feel like a grotesque fable rather than a simple moral tale.
Blood Tea and Red String is a stop-motion animated film from 2006. It's a haunting tale about 2 factions, one group made up of these furry dark critters and another made up of these fancy aristocratic-like mice, who decide to commission the dark critters to create a doll in the image of this woman. This ends up creating conflict between the groups when the dark critters love their creation so much that they are now unwilling to give it to the mice, prompting the mice to steal it back, leading to its own array of problems. The film explores themes of obsession, greed, and just the darker qualities of life, landing a spot on today's video for its creepy and eerie visuals. There's even a scene akin to the infamous alien sequence with an entity being birthed from a stomach. All of this, alongside the anthropomorphic animals, makes for a very unsettling watch given the nightmarish tone that the movie strives for. If you can see past all of the disturbing qualities of this film, I really think you're in for a great watch, as I mostly enjoyed the dreamlike experience that was Blood Tea and Red String. Seoul Station, created in 2016, serves as the disturbing prequel to the Train to Busan, an infamous zombie movie known for its brutal realism and is truly what people would call a non-stop thrill ride, with each scene in the original Train to Busan being a heart-pumping thrill where you can't figure out if your favorite character will live to see the next few minutes or not. And this prequel brings the same energy to the table, exploring the outbreak of a zombie epidemic in the slums of Seoul. What makes it truly disturbing is the exploration of social decay, homelessness, and societal neglect, with the zombie outbreak acting as a metaphor for these issues. The manner in which the film critiques these behaviors is to have the homeless population quite literally bite society in the butt. The entire film is full of just extremely graphic scenes of zombies mutilating and picking off the panicked survivors one by one. Now, as far as this film being as good as Train to Busan, I'm not so sure, right? That's a tall order to fill, but if you are a fan of zombie films and want to watch one of the very few that have a realistic take on the genre, then this is right up your alley. The brutal, uncaring violence, along with the characters' hopeless struggle for survival, create a truly harrowing experience, especially considering the way that this film ends, which is akin to the bittersweet ending of the original Train to Busan. Padak from 2012 is one of the few entries on this list that truly got to me when I watched it. This South Korean animated film is set in a seafood restaurant, with the characters we are following along the film being the fish in the fish tank. The same fish who are awaiting their inevitable death to be served as food. And what makes Padak so disturbing is its despairing depiction of captivity, torture, and death. As you watch the fish slowly die off one by one, you start empathizing with them, right? You're seeing their fears and emotions come to the surface, and no matter how much you see a single character struggle, there is this hopelessness that seeds itself inside your heart, as you know full well that no matter how hard they try to fight it, they will end up on the chopping block one way or another. And unlike many other movies that try to play these sequences up, like 2016's Sausage Party with its amplified music and screaming, the scenes where the fish die in this one are cold and they're scoreless, right? All you hear is the sound of the knife and the unrelentingness of the chef cutting his way into the fish. This film earns itself a spot because of the disturbing psychological horror that you can feel every time one of the fish gets picked and from their futile attempts to escape. This movie also contains one of the saddest endings to any film, and also just some harrowing, gut-wrenching scenes. Just because I don't want to spoil the film for any of you that might end up watching it, I wanted to talk about the ending and those scenes and how it all tied my stomach in knots, right? There was so many times when I watched this movie that I was just like, oh my god, like the emotions it put me through were crazy, and I really want to talk about it. But if you end up wanting to watch this movie, right, and you don't want it spoiled, skip past this. Go to the next entry. Everything's time stamped. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about the movie. So the main story of this film is derived from this mackerel fish that ends up at this fresh fish restaurant. The mackerel is then put into an aquarium with the other fish that are going to be eaten. And after seeing another fish gutted and eaten, the mackerel tries to escape, right? It jumps out of the tank and tries to flop its way toward the ocean, only to faint and end up back in the tank anyways. The other fish give the mackerel that tried to escape the nickname Padak, meaning slap slap or flappy. And it's the reason the movie is named Padak, obviously. Now, throughout the film, you are rooting for Padak. Right? You want them to get out, and there are many times where they try to escape. And they are overall a good person. And it's kind of funny that I describe them as a person, even though it's just a fish, right? And I say that they're a good person because this is displayed when other fish choose to be cannibals at times and eat their fellow fish just to survive a little longer in the tank. And when Padak is given this choice, they opt out every time. However, throughout the film, Padak is put through the ringer, right? Being fed lies by the wise old master fish, and ends up beaten nearly to death after using said information from those lies to escape into the crab tank. Padak is then thrown into the aquarium tank with the clownfish, right? The fish that aren't going to be eaten. And it's here that we get to the one scene that really made my skin crawl. We see Padak, a character who has always tried to just do the right thing, give in to their animal instincts, and eat the poor innocent clownfish who sound kind of like children. It's almost like Attack on Titan levels of fear, with just the way that Padak is shown on camera with like their huge eyeballs staring down the soul of this poor little clownfish. It is so disturbing, and it really made my skin crawl the first time I watched it, because it's just scary. Like just look at it, dude. It is like it. When you watch the film and you're so into it, and you see this character, like them go through this, it's really scary. It's literally like Attack on Titan levels of fear. There's like even one of them literally put into the fetal position, begging for their life. And throughout the entire film, you just want to see the masterfish get what's coming to them, because it's his fault that Padak is in this mess. And finally, after Padak gets out of the aquarium tank and is put back into the regular one, it's here that we, as the audience, get what we want, right? The master fish is chosen to be eaten, and you can see him fearing for his life. He looks around the restaurant and sees everything. He sees all of his friends being chomped on, the corpses of everyone he knows, and he realizes just how stupid it was to want to survive in an aquarium as much as he tried to keep everyone alive. But then the film makes one of the saddest, most stomach-churning decisions. The waiter stops the chef right before killing the masterfish, telling them that the customer wants mackerel instead. And so the master is returned, and him and Padak make up in a bonding, heartwarming moment. Padak realizing that the master was simply trying to keep everyone alive the entire time, and this heartwarming moment is then ruined by reality, when the main character we all grown fond of gets picked, gutted, and killed in front of everyone else. And what makes this scene so much worse is when the customer shoves his cigarette in the gutted, barely breathing Padak. This film does somewhat end on a high note, as the master is able to escape the morning after, just barely making it to the ocean thanks to the, he is right about to get to the ocean, and he starts hearing Padak's voice telling him to finish and make it to the end. So it is kind of like a high note, but I don't know, dude. It really left me feeling some kind of way. It's like similar to the ending of Train to Busan or Seoul Station, these bittersweet endings. And the master does escape and make his way to the dark depths of the sea, but this film left me feeling truly broken at times, especially during the soulless gutting scenes where the fish are entirely hopeless. If you ever needed a reason to not eat live moving animals, feel free to give this one a watch, as even though I never wanted to do that kind of thing in the first place, I sure as hell will not ever be thinking about doing it ever again.
An experimental animated horror film directed by Jimmy Screamer Claus, When Blackbirds Fly is known for its disturbing, violent imagery and nightmarish world. The film takes place in a bizarre, cult-like society where citizens are forbidden from questioning authority or exploring beyond their town. The animation style, which is jagged, erratic, and filled with grotesque imagery, adds to the unsettling atmosphere, making it feel like a visual descent into madness. One of the most disturbing scenes involves the citizens turning on each other, and a chaotic frenzy of violence after discovering the truth about their oppressive society. The surreal, almost psychedelic animation style enhances the nightmarish quality of the film, blurring the line between reality and delusion, making it an unsettling commentary on control and free will.
This is going to bring us to Layer 5. Layer 5 is where we start seeing the narratives of some films break up, as there is a good chunk from here that have little to no plot, but rely more on the atmospheric build-up to disturb the audience. That isn't to say that there aren't some with great stories to follow, such as our first entry on Layer 5. Metropia is one of the most uniquely animated films I've ever laid my eyes on. I mean, just look at the animation style. I can't describe what this reminds me of because I feel like I've seen nothing like it. Metropia is set in a dystopian future where Europe's cities are connected by a massive underground subway system, and the world itself is being mass mind controlled by a major corporation. And this sets the seeds for the biggest theme behind this movie, which is paranoia and conspiracy. The main character finds himself diving deep into the darker truth of the world he lives in, finding out about the mind control conspiracy, and while not believing it at first, sinks its teeth into his mind and begins to take over his entire life. And it all starts with this stupid shampoo bottle. Shortly after using it, he starts to see the model on the bottle in his real life. He literally goes to the train subway station and sees this model and tries to talk to him. And this one conversation leads him down an entire rabbit hole of just craziness. He ends up through this model eavesdropping on what is like this universe's Bilderberg meeting, where he learns of the mind-controlling substance within the shampoo that he's been using. It's just a crazy film, and it's one of those, I hate using the word slow burn because a lot of people just take that to mean it's boring, but it really is like a slow burn. I think if you want to watch something that's like uniquely animated, like and kind of cool, this is a really good film. Metropia, it explores like the themes of mind control, surveillance, and paranoia, and the disturbing elements for this one stem from the hyper-realistic, uncanny animation style that I cannot say I've really ever seen replicated. Right, the characters are animated with these photorealistic 3D models, and they feel cold and they feel lifeless, and it still at the same time manages to create an eerie visual experience that is honestly breathtaking. This aesthetic that has been created in this manner, it mirrors the oppressive world that the film represents, one where the citizens are constantly monitored and their every move is controlled, which I obviously think is a clear metaphor on possibly how the creator feels about our own world.
Directed by David Firth, the creator of Salad Fingers, Umbilical World is a nightmarish anthology film composed of surreal and disturbing shorts. It explores themes of existential dread, body horror, and societal decay through Firth's unique and unsettling animation style. The film's grotesque imagery and disjointed narrative structure makes it a deeply disturbing experience, drawing viewers into a world where the line between reality and delusion is constantly blurred. One of the most disturbing segments involves characters experiencing gruesome transformations, with their bodies mutating in unnatural and horrifying ways. The use of jagged, disorienting animation amplifies the film's nightmarish atmosphere, making it feel like a chaotic, feverish dream. The underlying sense of nihilism combined with the grotesque visuals solidifies Umbilical World as a haunting exploration of the human psyche and the anxieties of modern life.
Tale of Tales, created in 1979, is a wartime animated film that explores the desolate nature of the aftermath and current happenings that war leaves the world in. One of the most eerie sequences from this film is when this wandering wolf is exploring what seems to be the remains of the empty world. At first playing in a world full of life, represented by these cars being out front that seemingly disappear out of nowhere, leaving the wolf to do nothing but sit there and be depressed. Another scene that drives home the meaning and vibe of this film is this sequence that happens early on with these couples and lovers dancing at a ball until all of the husbands disappear one by one, seemingly because it's time for war, leaving their loved ones behind, and then later in the film coming back to this same scene, but only a few of the men have now come back to their wives, with the others being shown that the war got the better of them. Overall, the film interweaves memories, dreams, and folklore to tell a non-linear story that is meant to evoke a sense of melancholy surrounding the concept of war. Tale of Tales is disturbing not for graphic violence, but for its quiet, emotional intensity and its exploration of the darker aspects of the human experience and what it means to be human in times where the world feels lost. Dante's Inferno from 2007 is a unique take on the Divine Comedy. This one, although labeled as animated, is more of a stop-motion puppet style of animation. The film takes us through the normal story with Dante being guided down these circles of hell, with each one getting more grotesque and disgusting the deeper he goes. This one takes a more comedic approach rather than serious like other adaptations I've seen, with many humorous moments and jokes being littered throughout the entire film. But this one still does not hold back on the disturbing visuals when it's time to serve them up. There's scenes where characters get ripped in half and skinned alive and pulled down into hell. There's all types of suggestive imagery, and just all around, this clearly isn't a movie for the kiddos. It presents Dante's Inferno in a more modern sense, showcasing a contemporary version of the circles of hell, with each one relating to common crimes or situations that we've all encountered, or at the very least have read about somewhere. The crude paper cutout style paired with the violence and nightmarish imagery is why we are talking about it right now. The film faithfully adapts the brutal and torturous visions described in Dante's work, while at the same time allowing us to indulge in the comedic undertone that some people interpret from the original piece of work. If you've been putting off watching any kind of adaptation of Dante's Inferno and really want to watch it, but you want something that's relatively easy to digest but doesn't hold back on the dark imagery, this one is quite the easy watch and very much enjoyable, so long as you understand what exactly you're in for. Roots Search is an OVA from 1986, and it's a story that follows a group of space researchers who encounter an alien entity that ultimately begins ripping the entire group to shreds. Moira, one of the people aboard the ship, begins seeing visions of every single person being viciously killed. In an instant, the alarms start blaring and we see the ship is about to have a run-in with some kind of humongous alien entity. And the rest of the film is essentially the group's run-in with said alien as Moira's vision starts slowly becoming true, finding members of the group hung, dismembered, and in some cases going absolutely insane. The general consensus on this movie is that it's just kind of meh. It definitely earns its content rating because it can be a bit much at times with the graphic visuals, but there isn't too much to the movie beyond some insane violence. In my opinion, Roots Search is a product of its time when companies were just shilling out for these kinds of animes left and right, and it sticks out among the rest for its disturbingly graphic nature and body horror choices for deaths. They also did get one thing right early on, which was to make the alien spaceship not just a spaceship, but the actual entity itself. Considering that this is from 1986, that detail really surprised me, especially during the research for this section. The Bloody Lady is one of the more obscure entries on this list. It's a Czechoslovakian animated film based on a real historical figure by the name of Elizabeth Bathroy, a Hungarian noblewoman in 1560 who is said to have tortured and mutilated hundreds of young girls, utilizing her status as a noblewoman to lure these women under the guise of employment and then subjecting them to unspeakable acts that one can only imagine took place in the depths of her castle. One of the legends surrounding Elizabeth is that she would bathe in the blood of these girls to maintain her youth, and that one connection is how we get the Bloody Lady from 1980. While maintaining a simplistic animation style, this movie contains tons of horrific sequences inspired by the real acts from Elizabeth Bathroy. The story is told a bit differently though, with the noblewoman falling in love with a local peasant and goes on to give him her literal beating heart. And after this, she just turns into an evil person, obviously because she has no heart now. She just goes around hurting everything and everyone around her until she slices her servant's cheek with a piece of their blood landing on the noblewoman's hand. And after wiping it off, she notices that she is now paler and more beautiful and gets the idea to hire a servant to catch women so that she can bathe in their blood and stay youthful forever. And the rest of the movie is exactly that, and it's as sadistic as you would think, but it's not really visually impressive, which is kind of weird for stories like this, because to be honest, there isn't much substance beyond the violence in these types of animations. So it's truly a weird choice to not at the very least do it up for the more interesting parts of the movie. When, let's be honest, that's most likely the only reason people would decide to watch this. In short, The Bloody Lady explores its own version of the life of one of history's most notorious serial killers, told through its own unique style of simplistic animation. The Apostle, commonly known by its original name, El Apostolo, is a Spanish stop-motion animated film that tells the story of a convict named Ramon, who stumbles upon a village with a dark secret. He begins noticing that the entire town is eerily nice and courteous to him. Under the guise of suspicion, Ramon doesn't hesitate to take every opportunity to learn more about what's going on, and finds himself in the middle of what's called the Santa Campana, an old folktale from Galatian and Assyrian folklore that tells the story of a procession of spirits being led by a living person who is cursed to lead them. This so happens to be our protagonist, Ramon, who now must find out how to stop this curse or he's going to be killed. This film's disturbing nature comes from its exploration of occultism and the eerie, isolated village that creates this truly gritty and dark atmosphere. The stop-motion animation is beautifully done, and I honestly can't figure out why more studios don't put this much effort in now. Overall, this film relies less on stunning visuals and graphicness and decides to be a bit of a slow burn that wants to pull you in and bring you into the world that Ramon has now found himself in. The combination of folklore, religious imagery, and the uncanny animation style is sure to create a deeply unsettling viewing experience for those that choose to watch The Apostle.
Based on the graphic novel by John Bergen, From Inside is a bleak, post-apocalyptic animated film that follows a pregnant woman on a train journey through a devastated world. The film's disturbing nature comes from its grim, atmospheric depiction of a world ravaged by disaster, disease, and famine. The animation, which uses a dark, sketch-like style, adds to the oppressive tone of the film, immersing viewers in a desolated landscape filled with death and decay. One particular disturbing sequence shows the train passing through a field of rotting corpses, a stark reminder of the mass death that has occurred in this apocalyptic world. The protagonists struggle to maintain hope in the face of such overwhelming despair. Combined with the haunting imagery of the world in ruins, makes From Inside a deeply unsettling exploration of life and death in a world without hope.
Ubu and the Great Gidouille is based on the absurdist play by Alfred Jarry, aptly named Ubu Roy. And if I were to summarize this movie in a sentence, I would say that this film is absolutely all over the place. There's like 3 different plots going on during this film. The first third is about Ubu and his wife's strive for power, and they stage a coup to overthrow the current king of Poland. And at this point, I was expecting this movie to be similar to The Bloody Lady and have it be about Ubu and maybe his like grotesque ways of treating his servants. But then that plot gets thrown out halfway through, and they get overthrown when the rightful heir to the throne comes and takes his throne back. And then the rest of the movie is just a mess. Ubu becomes a scientist, cutting people's heads open and creating these monstrosities, and then he gives up that entire life he just built and throws it away to become an indentured servant, and goes on to explain how being a slave is the best way to live. I'm not joking. This is literally what happens in the movie. This movie's like an hour and 10 minutes, and it's just all over the place. And after he becomes a servant, he gets thrown in jail, and then the plot just like, it just kind of ends there. And then Ubu floats into the sky and devours and eats a bunch of people that we've seen throughout the film. Then he explodes, and a bunch of other smaller Ubus dressed as other characters fly out of his now exploded stomach. I really wanted to cut this movie from this video because although it is disturbing, like I did not have a pleasurable experience watching this. It was not fun. It just stands out from the rest because it's not really something that I think deserves a watch, but I didn't want to waste the time that I sunk into this film, so I'm subjecting you all to this terrible part of this video. This movie reads like someone who believed that they had something to say, but when they tried to actually say it, it just made no sense. It's kind of like when you're trying to explain a dream to your friend and the dream is just nonsensical. Like there's just random things happening for random sake. That's what I feel like with this movie. But it's weird because like throughout the film, it's very clear that the creator of the film is trying to say something, right? It's trying to be satire on something, right? I'm getting mad satirical vibes from the movie. You know, it's clearly supposed to be a commentary on something, but that something gets lost in translation because the film is just an utter mess. If you've ever heard of this film or seen it, please enlighten us all below on why this movie is the way it is and why you maybe enjoy it. Adam 2 is a surrealist take on what I believe to be an adaptation of the Adam and Eve story, if you can even call it an adaptation. This movie kind of fell into the same category as the last one, Ubu and the Great Gidouille, where the story was just extremely hard to follow and also just hard to watch. Even with the synopsis, speaking of which, here it is. Adam's everyday life is boring and depressing. To escape it mentally, he sinks into his childhood memories and fantasies that are populated by angels and witches. He himself has the role of Superman, who comes to the aid of all the oppressed. And this does happen in the movie. But even knowing that's what's going on, there are times in this film where I have no clue if what I'm watching is actually happening or just in his mind. And as far as the Adam and Eve plotline, there comes a time near the end of the film where Adam puts himself, or he finds himself at what I think is the beginning of creation with a box labeled 44, a number that is prevalent throughout the film. And from researching online, this number represents some significance. It's a symbol of positive energy, and it's also an angel number, being a sign that you're on the right path. And right path it is, as he makes his way through door after door after door after door until the movie fades to black. I will say that there were moments in this film that were kind of eerie and hard to watch, so I'd comfortably say it belongs on this list, but God, it was just such a terrible movie. Some of the notable sequences are this one where Adam's head explodes and turns into this mush. There's this one where these creepy headed figures like slowly and eerily watch like you, the viewer. Following this scene, in fact, is I will say one of the more disturbing sequences in this list, where this man is shoved into some kind of like tank or drum and he's blended. Like I literally can't tell what's going on. That's what it seems like to me. Yeah, I'm gonna give this movie some credit. I think the film is meant to explore themes of like isolation and maybe technological advancement, as there's parts that we randomly just see like live footage of rockets going to space and technology playing a bigger part of the film. But I feel like, again, there is just like no coherence to the idea, and it's just all over the place at times. But regardless, it does have some truly unsettling scenes that make Adam 2 a messy yet creepy watch. This will bring us to layer 6. Now, aside from the first entry on layer 6, the rest fall into that random obscureness category where it feels like the creators just made a fever dream of a film and threw in lots of disturbing and graphic imagery for no reason. Some of these films, I have to say, make absolutely no sense and somehow still left me feeling unsettled by the end. Thankfully, the first entry is a strong one that we've actually talked about already on this channel. I've already talked about Protect and Survive in Volume 5 to my Disturbing Media series, but just to save you the time and effort of having to go click through and watch that, Protect and Survive is a British government-produced animated short film series created during the Cold War to inform the public about what to do in the event of a nuclear attack. And while its primary purpose was to be nothing more than an educational documentary, the film's eerie and surreal animation contrasted with the calm narration make it one of the most disturbing pieces of media from the Cold War era. The 20-part series contains numerous info dumps on all of the necessities on what to do during a nuclear attack. From what nuclear explosions are, to which room is safest in your house, to how to handle the disturbing aftermath of such an event. In fact, that last tidbit is most likely why you were hearing about this. The most controversial episode is one titled Casualties, where the narrator describes what to do with the dead bodies of your loved ones that couldn't withstand the radiation from your tutorial-made refugee camp that they showed you how to make in previous episodes. Keep in mind, this series is supposed to be something that is supposed to calm the viewer during nuclear fallout, and I think that's why it's so eerie, right? Because although we are watching something that never aired, the fact that it was created, when you watch it and you have like headphones on like I did and you just put yourself in the world, it feels real and it feels kind of like it's happening and you're sitting here learning what to do in your current situation. There were many times throughout the series where just the quiet buzzing sound combined with the jump cut animation made me feel like something was going to jump scare me at any time, despite nothing like that ever happening. Overall, the tension between the calm delivery and the apocalyptic subject matter creates this vibe of sheer dread, making Protect and Survive a deeply disturbing piece of historical media that serves as a grim reminder of the fear that gripped the Cold War era. Mecanix, created in 2003, is an experimental, surreal, stop-motion animated film set in a dystopian post-apocalyptic world where humans are enslaved by these machine-like creatures. The film's reputation comes from its grotesque, otherworldly imagery, combining organic and mechanical life forms in unsettling ways that are akin to stuff like Tetsuo the Iron Man. The stop-motion animation can be jerky and even disorienting at times, which really drives the creepy visuals that I think this film is striving for. Just the way that the creatures move send goosebumps all over my body, and I have to give it to them on the animation, because the overall look of this film is just so well done. But it's not the kind of movie that I think you would watch for plot. Speaking of which, the plot seems to be about a world where, like you've heard time and time before in this entire thing, only machines are alive with one human remaining. Although this one uses real-life actors in tangent with these stop-motion creations to create what I believe to be some really haunting images. In fact, one of the most disturbing scenes of the film involves one of these hybrid monstrosities of man and machine. We see this thing writhing in agony as this man seemingly restrains it and I think tortures it. I can't even really tell what's going on at times. But overall, I just couldn't make out a lot with this movie, but Mecanix is like, it's a really challenging viewing experience that I just really don't think many people would be too fond of if they chose to watch it themselves. Heaven and Earth Magic. This is the movie that I had playing during the intro, and it's because it's so bad, dude. So this movie is an experimental animated film that uses cutout animation and surrealism to tell, well, I would say story, but it doesn't really have one. And I'm being dead serious. After watching this dreadful 66 minutes of film, if you can even call it that, I had no idea what the plot of this movie was. Even IMDb, which is usually like my surefire last minute desperation way to find out any of the synopsis of any of the movies that I've went over in this, even IMDb had no idea what this movie was about. It literally says it's a sequence of surreal cutout animation imagery, largely without a discernible narrative. And that about summarizes the movie. So why are we talking about it? Well, throughout the 66 minutes, you can find tons of hypnotic and often extremely bizarre images with just the most like obscure like sound bites that I couldn't have imagined myself. Believe me when I say that AI could not have recreated this. It's it's a weird movie for sure, and every review I've seen of it has no idea what to make out of it. It really feels like even the person who created it has no idea what they made. And just to prove it, I'm going to read off the creator's words directly from his synopsis of the movie. The first part depicts the heroine's toothache consequent to the loss of a valuable watermelon, her dentistry, and transportation to heaven. Next follows an elaborate exposition of the heavenly land in terms of Israel, Montreal, and the second part depicts the return to Earth from being eaten by Max Muller on the day Edward VII dedicated the Great Sewer of London. I literally have no idea what I just read. This guy, oh, dude, I'm getting so mad. This is literally what he said. I feel like I'm going insane reading this. These films bug me because I'm a firm believer in that there has to be some reason this movie was made. Even if the plot makes no sense, there has to be some reason that this movie was made. Even if it was just to be like, I made something weird. Like, there is always some kind of thought behind everything. But, dude, this movie reminded me of how I felt when I first researched the original part 1 to my Disturbing Media Iceberg series, right? I have no clue what was supposed to be going on, but you know, I gotta give it to whoever made this Iceberg, because this is one of the more obscure animated films that I've ever had the displeasure of viewing. Just the way that the sound bites and the visuals mix together, they do create this disconcerting vibe that I really did not enjoy as I was watching it. So I guess it succeeded in making me feel something. So, you know, I will say that it was an unsettling watch. If anyone has seen the film and somehow enjoys it, I would love to hear why, because I just don't see how anyone could possibly enjoy watching 66 minutes of a literal fever dream without just wanting to like it just to feel different. Sea Roar, otherwise known by its original name Umi no Uta, is a Japanese short animated in a minimalist style that really reminds me of Doom, but only if it were black and white and like way slower paced. To be completely honest, I don't think I should have been as disturbed watching this as I was. It was late when I watched this film, but I was home alone and I watched this with a pair of headphones on, and it was one of the most unnerving experiences I've ever had with anything. And I say that having sat through my fair share of unnerving material. This film felt like a long, forceful walk through broken down boats and wreckage and just rummaging through anything you can find, while a group of what I think are like occultists take you in and perform rituals on you. It really does feel like a long POV, while the loud, almost white noise like soundscape pulls you in and then jump scares you with these ear-piercing sounds to create an experience that I did not expect when going into this film. From the moment it started right to the very end, it was not a fun watch, to say the least. And it's weird because it feels as nonsensical as some of the other entries like the last one, but even this felt like it had some type of narrative, even if that narrative was just to take you, the viewer, on a journey through this dreadful world. There was a particularly haunting sequence that I wanted to talk about that made me want to stop watching. So it shows what I believe to be the inside of like a broken ship, while this black figure appears out of nowhere in the middle of the screen, and then suddenly, after enough time passes by, this figure takes up the entire screen, and then we start inching closer and closer as the soundscape starts to pick up, and suddenly these faces begin flashing on the screen as the musical score jumps in pace. And this movie is just, if I were to describe it in one word, it would be tension. The tension that builds up to these moments made me feel extremely vulnerable and anxious and just plain scared. Like I said it once and I'll say it again, I did not expect any of the movies on here to unsettle me the way that this one did. So if you want to have the same dreadful experience, make sure to check out Umi no Uta, as along with most of the other animations. I'm going to link it below. The Tale of the Priest and of his Workman Balda, otherwise known as Balda Bazaar, is technically lost media, as the full 40-minute version no longer exists after it was nearly lost in a fire caused by the 1941 bombing of Leningrad. Based on the poem by Alexander Pushkin, The Tale of the Priest and of his Workman Balda is a Soviet animated film known for its experimental animation style. What makes what's left of this animated short so disturbing is the grotesque and caricatured characters, paired alongside with the loud opera-like voice and music, gives this animation this really uncanny experience. To be honest, there's not much to say about, only 2 minutes of film that's left over. Only one can imagine what the 40-minute version would be like based on what we have here. This is the only surviving footage of this. And even this one, like, it starts out somewhat normal for like animation, and then it just turns just kind of sadistic and weird. And there's been a lot of speculations on what the rest of the film could have looked like, but it's just rather unfortunate that nothing more remains past this tiny clip, because who knows what other disturbing imagery may have lied in the tale of the priest and of his workman Balda. If you made it here, then you made it to the end of today's video. This video was a long time in the making. I knew I wanted to do this iceberg like years ago, and I had saved it like a while back, and it was one of the coolest. Like, I'm very selective when I do these videos. I don't just pick like random icebergs and like just I'm gonna do this one. I try to be as selective as I can, but this one had so many animations that I'd never heard of, and even when I was researching it, I was just like, who made this stuff, dude? It is so weird, man. Yeah, it was a blast making this. I had fun hanging out with Elijah from MediaAdoration. He's cool. Probably gonna do more videos with him in the future. Yeah, if you haven't seen my last video on It's Such a Beautiful Day, the film that cured my fear of death, go check that out. Probably gonna do more stuff in the future similar to that. I don't know if I'm gonna make a second channel for those kind of videos or not, because I'm thinking about it. I think when I do like these like really deep analytical pieces, I'd rather have them be their own thing and have this channel just be like scary stuff. But we'll see how that goes in the future. If you're watching here, like, thank you for watching. I usually just rant at the end of my videos if you're coming from Elijah's channel, and this video was a blast to make. I had so much fun talking to Elijah and like coming up with ideas and stuff, and I think we couldn't have picked a better topic, especially closing in on Halloween. So yeah, this video probably won't get out before Halloween, but it'll come out close enough to it that we'll still be transitioning out of spooky season into like the holidays. But anyways, if that is all I have to say, I'm gonna get to the patron shout out. What a bad transition. But thank you to everyone for supporting me on Patreon. I've actually been getting a little bit more support recently, and it goes a long way. It really does go a long way, helping the channel out. And yeah, life has been getting good. There's a lot of things that have happened lately. So much family problems that are finally resolved, that are making YouTube a lot easier to come back to and actually go full force at. Had a lot of people in the background inspiring me and keeping me going, and you guys are part of that group of people that whenever I look at the Patreon, I'm just like, dude, like, I gotta make some videos. I gotta do something, and it does keep me going, not just like financially, but like just emotionally and mentally. So thank you to everyone that is joining on there and bothers to keep up with it. Yeah, I can't thank you all enough, and yeah, I don't really have a lot to say. I love everyone that watches my videos. If you're one of those few who sticks it to the end. Thank you so much. I'm gonna try and have some more stuff coming out, like merch in the future. As I've said before in other videos, I have literally a bunch of merch that I haven't sold in the back of my closet that I haven't put up yet. I'm gonna get around to doing that. I'm working on like a shop right now, still trying to figure out how to get like shipping labels and stuff made, because I was gonna do it all in-house, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that anymore. Yeah, so thank you to everyone that is on the Patreon. You guys are amazing people, and you choose to support me every day and every month, even though you don't have to, and it goes such a long way. So yeah, with all that said, I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.